Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on today's session. Today's session is session number 3 in our emergency broadcast, which relates to the Division of Workers' Compensation's new disciplinary guidelines and new interpretation of the complexity factors, the medical legal fee schedule, the official medical legal fee schedule, under CCR 9795. In session number 1, we talked about how hundreds and hundreds of doctors are being disciplined for what the Division of Workers' Compensation concludes is a misuse of the complexity factors under CCR 9795. And these doctors are suffering harsh discipline, meaning revocation of their QME credential and other harsh disciplinary measures. In session 2 of this program, we talked about the complexity factors themselves, and we talked about two of the most apparently controversial of the complexity factors. Controversial, I say, because they're receiving a lot of attention recently down at the Division of Workers' Compensation, and many doctors' reports are being rejected based on failure to adequately comply with the letter of the law of the complexity factors, specifically complexity factors related to causation and apportionment. And it seems that according to the Division of Workers' Compensation, many doctors are misusing these two complexity factors, and the division has put out new guidelines and new criteria for the proper use of these complexity factors, and we went over those in session 2. Now today in session 3, I want to finish up with the complexity factors, and I want to talk to you about the higher billing levels, the ML103 and ML104 billing levels, because the Division of Workers' Compensation, it seems, is making an attack on the higher billing levels. And specifically, we're talking about the ML104 billing level, but they're also looking at reports to make sure, or to see if indeed they even qualify for the ML103 level, based again upon the DWC's new imposition of a new interpretation of the complexity factors. Said another way, the Division of Workers' Compensation is finding that many reports that are billed at ML103 and even ML104 do not even qualify for ML103 based upon the new interpretation of the complexity factors, including causation and apportionment. So today we're talking about these higher billing levels that are being attacked by the Division of Workers' Compensation. Now, the higher billing levels, and especially the ML104, is billed out at an doctor hourly rate of $250 per hour. Now, this is not the only complexity factor that allows for billing, doctor billing, at the rate of $250 an hour. ML101, which is a follow-up medical legal evaluation, bills for $250 per hour. ML105, the fees for medical legal testimony, bills at $250 per hour. ML106 bills at $250 per hour for supplemental reports, supplemental evaluations. So that's ML101, ML104, ML105, and ML106. 4 billing codes allow for doctor billing at the rate of $250 per hour. Now, based upon that, it's my speculation that the Division of Workers' Compensation expects that us as qualified medical evaluating doctors should be paid at about the hourly rate of $250 per hour, okay? There's that many codes that provide for billing at $250 per hour. Now, the ML102 and ML103 codes bill for a fixed fee. The ML102 bills out for, I believe it's $625, and the ML103 bills out for, I believe it's $937.50. Now, in having a fixed fee for these levels, these ML102 and ML103 levels, what do you think is the intent of the Division of Workers' Compensation that doctors be paid? It's my belief, it's my speculation, and I'm the first to admit it, that the Division of Workers' Compensation still expects us to be paid at about $250 per hour, but they expect, or they project, that an ML102 evaluation should bill out at about slightly more than 2+ hours. Slightly more than 2+ hours. If you take 625 and divide it by $250 per hour, I think you get 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours. So the Division of Workers' Compensation expects that a basic evaluation at the ML102 level should bill at about $250 per hour for about 2.5 hours. The ML103, which bills at $937.50, should take a little bit between 3 and 4 hours. It's a little bit more complex because there's another issue to discuss in the report, and there's a couple of other criteria as well, but it should take about 3 to 4 hours. In fact, 4 hours is one of the complexity factors that comprises the ML103. So certainly not much more than 4 hours. Now, in establishing a fixed fee for the ML102 and ML103s, do you believe it's the intent of the Division of Workers' Compensation to basically preserve the doctor's billing rate at $250 per hour? Or do you believe it's their intent to have doctors do an extended report taking 10 and 20 hours and billing an ML102 at $625 and getting $50 per hour doctor hourly billing rate? I don't believe that was the intention of the Division of Workers' Compensation. I believe the intention of the Division of Workers' Compensation is to put the doctor's billing rate at approximately $250 per hour across all work. Across all work, and work at the ML102 and ML103 level, they anticipate to be at the 2 to 5 hour commitment level. Okay? But the Division of Workers' Compensation is saying that the $250 per hour billing level now is not always applying to the ML104 exam, but is applying to the ML104 exam only in very select circumstances. And I want to talk to you about those select circumstances now, which will pretty much obviate all of your ML104 billing reports from here on out, thus driving down the cost of your average report from the ML104 level to the ML103 level at $937.50. And I hope that sinks in and you understand fully the implication of that. Okay, so let's review a few things about the medical legal fee schedule. The medical legal fee schedule. Okay? So let's talk now about the ML103 and ML104 complexity factors. Now, you're all familiar with CCR 97.5 and the complexity factors, especially under ML103, but I just want to review a couple of things, and we've already talked about this in prior videos as well. But the requirement states that you must describe your use of the complexity factors in a separate section at the beginning of the report. The physician shall clearly and concisely specify which of the following complexity factors were required for the evaluation, comma, and the circumstances which made these complexity factors applicable to the evaluation. And that's where most doctors fall down. They fail to cite the circumstances. They fail to cite their circumstances which made these complexity factors applicable to the evaluation. So doctors will say in their complexity factors, they'll say something like, quote unquote, causation was addressed, period. And they forget to include the circumstances wherein a discussion of causation was applicable to the evaluation. And the Division of Workers' Compensation is disciplining these doctors that fail to cite the circumstances, because they know that the reason that the doctors failed to cite the circumstances is because there were no circumstances. The doctor simply invoked the complexity factor in order to elevate or escalate or levitate his report to the next billing level when it actually did not qualify for the next billing level. So in a separate section of your report, you have to create a fabulous case for yourself in terms of your use of the complexity factors, if you expect the complexity factors to be reimbursed properly. So you have to have it in a separate section, okay? So then on to the ML 104 complexity factors. I assume that you are familiar with the complexity factors under ML 103, because we're going to use some of those in arriving at the criteria described in the ML 104 level. Okay, so we'll talk about some of those specific complexity factors as they come up here in conversation. Okay, so the ML 104 is the comprehensive medical legal evaluation involving extraordinary circumstances. Extraordinary circumstances. Now, it's my opinion that yesterday's extraordinary is today's ordinary. Most of the reports that I've written myself, most of the reports that I've ever seen doctors write, are all ML 104 reports. Why is that? Because they're extremely complex to do. Nowadays, every case involves extraordinary circumstances, and the demands on us as QMEs to include more and better quality information in our reports makes each and every case an extraordinary case. So it's the rare case that's the 2.5 hour case or the 3.5 hour case. That's the rare exceptional case. Most of the cases that we're getting qualify as extraordinary cases. So what was yesterday's extraordinary is now today's ordinary. But it says, so here's the first complexity factor under ML 104. An evaluation which requires 4 or more of the complexity factors listed under ML 103. In 103, and it says again in a separate section at the beginning of the report, the physician shall clearly and concisely specify which 4 or more of the complexity factors were required in the evaluation and the circumstances which made these complexity factors applicable to the evaluation. An evaluator who specifies complexity factor 3, which is medical research, must also provide a list of citations to the sources reviewed and excerpt or include copies of medical evidence relied upon. We talked about medical research as a complexity factor. If you use medical research as a complexity factor, you must document it exactly the way it's described here. List in the body of your report the citations that you reviewed, the medical evidence that you relied upon, and give the reader of the report the conclusion of the medical research for which you want them to pay you for. Okay, so give them the benefit of what they're paying for by concluding all the medical research and applying it to the case. And make sure you explain the circumstances which made the medical research necessary. So that's complexity factor number 1 under the ML 104, that it requires 4 or more of the complexity factors under ML 103. Let me just give you an example of that. That might be 3 hours of review of records, 3 hours of face-to-face time. Okay, so that's 6 hours total between face-to-face review of records and medical research, there's 6 hours total. That qualifies as 3 complexity factors. Now, one additional complexity factor, such as addressing medical causation upon written request of the party or parties requesting the report, there's your 4 complexity factors, and you're at the ML 104 level. Okay? So there's one example of the first complexity factor. Now, the second complexity factor says an evaluation involving prior multiple injuries to the same body part or parts being evaluated now, and which requires 3 or more of the complexity factors listed under ML 103, including 3 or more hours of record review by the physician. So, for example, 3 hours of record review and 3 hours of face-to-face would qualify as 3 complexity factors under ML 103. Okay? The fourth complexity factor, which was required under complexity factor above, we used as causation, correct, in that example? Well, in this example, the fourth complexity factor is prior multiple injuries to the same body part or body parts. The DWC considers an evaluation that takes you 3 hours of review of records and 3 hours of face-to-face time and an addressment of prior multiple injuries to the same body part or parts being evaluated. They consider that to be extraordinary. I'm telling all of you out in the audience here that that's ordinary. That's every single case. Every single case has enough medical records for 3 hours of review of records. The face-to-face evaluation is sufficiently complex, especially in the context of prior multiple injuries. It's especially complex and detailed in the physical examination, face-to-face, in the activities of daily living assessment, face-to-face, in obtaining the relevant medical history, face-to-face, and doing all the things that are required, including administering symptom questionnaires, and everything that's required in the face-to-face evaluation can easily extend past 3 hours, okay? And prior multiple injuries, these are extraordinary cases. But I'm telling you as the audience, these are the ordinary cases. This describes every case we get. So that's the second complexity factor under ML 104. Okay? The first one was 4 or more complexity factors from ML 103, and now prior multiple injuries plus 3 of the complexity factors from ML 103. The third circumstance, which allows for billing at the ML 104 level, is a comprehensive medical legal evaluation for which the physician and the parties agree prior to the evaluation, that is, that the evaluation involves extraordinary circumstances. So I can tell you that I've used this complexity factor, I think, once or twice. I think it's once, maybe twice, in my entire career. There was something that was extremely complex related to the medical condition, and I obtained prior agreement that it was indeed an extraordinary case. I've used that once, okay? Now, what's interesting about this complexity factor is this complexity factor is not in any way related to time. There's no time component. It doesn't require any of the complexity factors from ML 103 to be carried over to it. It's unrelated to time. It's not related to review of records. It's not related to your face-to-face time. It's not related to your assessment of causation. It's not related to whether or not the examinee had prior multiple injuries to the same body part or parts being evaluated. It's unrelated to all of the other complexity factors. It simply provides for a billing at the ML 104 level when the parties can agree that the case is extraordinary. You may have 1 page of medical records. You may be with the examinee 30 minutes face-to-face. You may not address causation. You may not address apportionment. But if the parties agree and you get an agreement, then you can bill at the ML 104 level for this. So what a fabulous way to obtain authorization for billing at your ML 104 level. Obtain prior written agreement from the payer, the claims administrator, the claims adjuster. That would be a guaranteed payment at the ML 104 level. Okay? It's a great complexity factor because it's unrelated to time and it's unrelated to review of records. But in my experience, this represents the exceptional, rare case. As I said, I think I've had one but no more than two of these prior agreements in my entire career. Okay? Now, so that's the third complexity factor under ML 104. Again, it's 4 or more complexity factors under ML 103. Prior multiple injuries plus 3 complexity factors under ML 103, or forget all of that nonsense and just get prior agreement from the party or parties that the case is extraordinary, and you can use the ML 104 billing level. So there's 3 complexity factors under ML 104. Now here's where the Division of Workers' Compensation throws us a new twist in their interpretation of the complexity factors. And I submit to you that this is a twist that you could never make up yourself. This is the most bizarre interpretation of the language. It has only one intent, in my opinion, and that is to drive down the number of reports that qualify as the ML 104 billing level. It basically eliminates the first 2 of the complexity factors and allows only for the ML 104 to be used when you have prior written agreement from the party or parties requesting the report. Okay? And let me demonstrate that to you. So to review, there's 3 complexity factors. Now after the third complexity factor, it used to be written in CCR 9795 after that third complexity factor, which was prior written agreement from the party or parties requesting the report, it would say period at the end of that sentence, new line, new paragraph, and the new paragraph said the following. It said, when billing under this code, which is the ML 104 code, for extraordinary circumstances, the physician shall include in his or her report a clear, concise explanation of the extraordinary circumstances related to the medical condition being evaluated, which justifies the use of this procedure code. Okay, so a clear, concise statement explaining the extraordinary circumstance, which is unrelated to time, it's unrelated to review of records, it's unrelated to face-to-face time, but it's extraordinary. So you simply explain it, and you get allowed to use the ML 104 billing level. And then number 2, then provide verification under penalty of perjury of the total time spent by the physician in each of these activities: reviewing the records, face-to-face time with the injured worker, preparing the report, and, if applicable, any other activities. It's the position of the Division of Workers' Compensation that the time spent by the doctor in preparing the report, as we're required to list here under this code, it's the position of the Division of Workers' Compensation that the time spent preparing the report is only compensated when the physician bills under the ML 104 level by using complexity factor number 3, which is the one that requires the doctor to get prior written authorization from the party or parties. How does the Division of Workers' Compensation link those 2 together? They link those 2 together by deleting the paragraph, deleting the space, and moving that sentence immediately following complexity factor number 3. So I don't know if you can see this, but I have my finger here on complexity factor number 3. It's one paragraph, but it used to be 2. It used to be 2 paragraphs, and the second paragraph removed the requirement of when billing under this code for extraordinary circumstances, the physician shall include clear, concise statement and all that stuff. It separated that from the complexity factor, which requires prior written authorization. It used to be that requirement that the physician include a clear, concise statement applied to each of the three complexity factors under ML 104. But by deleting the space and the paragraph and connecting those 2 paragraphs, it relates the report preparation time and reimbursement for the report preparation time only to the circumstance when the physician has prior written agreement that the examination is extraordinary. Now, does that seem logical to you? The ML 101 does not separate out the doctor's report preparation time. The ML 106 does not separate out the doctor's report preparation time. Why would the ML 104 separate out the doctor's report preparation time when the doctor is doing a report that complies with complexity factor number 2? In other words, it's an evaluation involving prior multiple injuries to the same body part or body parts, and which requires 3 or more of the complexity factors under ML 103, including 3 or more hours of record review by the physician. Why would they eliminate out the doctor's report preparation time from that report? And so nobody knows why the complexity factors are being interpreted this way, but the net effect of it is to reduce the number of reports that qualify as the ML 104 level, thereby reducing the average cost of reports across the entire industry, across the entire state, and reducing the doctor's compensation for otherwise time-consuming and complex and extraordinary work, which represents basically every single case that we do. And that's where we have it with regards to those complexity factors. So to summarize this up, what we are presenting to you in this series, and especially in today's session, are what is now known about the DWC's new interpretation of the complexity factors. Up until now, not much was known about how the DWC is looking at the complexity factors. How do they want us to prepare our reports? How do they want us to bill our reports? See, my interviews with doctors tell me that doctors would comply if they simply knew what to do, if they simply knew what the DWC wanted. So not much has been known. But now more has become known with the filing of a lawsuit by some Southern California doctors against the Division of Workers' Compensation. And that lawsuit is now public record, and the lawsuit describes the DWC's position on many of these complexity factors, and their position is exposed in their documents and communications with these doctors and subsequently with the doctors' lawyers. So we're now getting some idea as to how the DWC is interpreting these complexity factors, and the take-home message on that interpretation is their interpretation is intended to drive down costs of reports. Now, I agree with their approach in at least one way, and that is they're attempting to drive down costs of reports that really don't qualify for the billing level or for the dollar amount that doctors are billing these reports at. And I've read some of these reports, and I agree that some doctors are simply not following the complexity factors properly at all, really, basically. And they deserve to be disciplined in some way, shape, or form. In some way, shape, or form. I don't know what that should be, but they're trying to reduce the cost of fraudulent reports, certainly, but I believe they're trying to drive down the cost of all reports, even the extraordinary ML104 cases. Why else would they hog tie and handcuff a doctor and not reimburse him for all the time involved with completing the evaluation? The ML101 provides for all time involved reimbursed. The ML105 provides for all time involved reimbursed. The ML106 provides for all time involved reimbursed. Why would an ML104 cut the doctor's arm off at the elbow and reduce his report by the report preparation time? It makes no sense. And I believe that this is going to blow over, and those two paragraphs will again be separated out as they always historically have been. But until now, you need to be aware of what the DWC's interpretation is, and fashion your billing levels accordingly if you want to stay under the DWC's radar. Okay? So this concludes our 3 sessions on the emergency broadcast related to the Division of Workers' Compensation. It's our hope that this broadcast will help you to practice safely as a QME and enjoy a long, profitable, and undisciplined career as a qualified medical evaluator. So this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I want to thank you for joining me on today's session. Look forward to being with you on future sessions as well. And for now, I'm wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical evaluator.